You've got to understand the why behind what you're doing. Otherwise, how do you know that you're not just wasting your time? You want to build your structural integrity before you take on something such as sprinting, because your bones, your ligaments, your tendons, they're not ready for that yet. What you want to do, though, is force the brain to recruit and sequence your muscle fibers faster, your fast twitch fibers faster. Form is key. One of the hardest things is to give you enough recovery so that your metabolic pathway, your cardiorespiratory system recovers and your muscle fibers recover. The whole purpose of this is training your heart and your lungs, these central adaptations to get your heart to move more oxygen-rich blood.
All right, everybody, welcome to the show. I got Chris Henshaw on here. I didn't mean for this to be a show. It's really just a phone call between two friends. Chris came on my podcast a few years ago and gave out tremendous advice. I was just kind of starting my running journey, and since he's been back on the show a couple times, we communicated back and forth over the years about many different programs and training and everything. But it's pretty much time for me to mature into, following some sort of organized programming. It's not like it's not organized. I send you stuff all the time, Chris, and we go back and forth. And so I have a few people kind of looking at stuff, but I need to get a deeper understanding of all this. And Chris is like, why don't we get on the phone? Because I saw some things in your form recently. I'm seeing some good progressions. I'm seeing other areas where you can do a lot better. And so here he is, everybody, Chris Henshaw.
Yeah, no, I like all the information that you send, and there's a reason why you were so successful as an athlete is because you're in this constant quest to learn. And it's interesting to me, Mark, that the athletes that win, the ones that, get the gold medals, the world champions, are the ones that want to learn. They want to know. They're not just tell me what to do. Those athletes never survive. You've got to be smart. You've got to understand the why behind what you're doing. Otherwise, how do you know that you're not just wasting your time? So,
it's a great point. And so, I've kind of more recently have been working on some 400-meter sprints, some 200-meter. But even before I started any of that, I just started off with a lot of long distance type stuff. What happened was I went to the track a couple times and before I started my long distance work, and I hurt myself. And I was even going slow. I mean, I knew better than to just take off. Like I know that, and I wasn't even trying to go fast, but I still hurt myself. I'd get like a lower leg injury. And then one time I kind of tore something, it felt like, in my hip or like stomach. And I was like, I'm having a terrible go of it. So what I thought to myself was, well, what do I always teach people? When someone says their shoulder hurts for bench pressing or something, I usually say, well, does it hurt with just bench pressing the bar? And they'll be like, no. I'll say, okay, well, why don't we just bench press the bar? And so that was my thought process, was like, let me just lower the intensity and see if I can walk and jog and just build some sort of work capacity to handle some of this. And then maybe I'll sprint, kind of a, walk before you run type thing.
Right. It's like you want to build your structural integrity before you take on something such as sprinting, because your bones, your ligaments, your tendons, they're not ready for that yet. I mean, it's the same thing like we've talked about when people come into the gym and you're teaching them technique on weightlifting and you have them with the PVC pipe. It's like everybody just wants to lift heavy. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. And that's really, though, hard for a lot of people because, unfortunately, you have to do a lot of work in order for you to actually get to that juicy stuff. And that's where, like, I look at what you're doing now. I mean, you've run a marathon. Your foundation is incredible. The fact that you've done all of that volume and you're as healthy as you are. I mean, and I'm talking about like through your life. I think that's really, for me, it's exciting. I mean, the fact that you're so fast twitch dominant and your structure is still good. I really wonder long-term your ability to do I'm talking about a really fast, that's why I sent you the 200 and the 400 times, to get on the podium in the US. And it's challenging, but it's doable.
Yeah, and I still just don't know what I'm doing. So I think that's like, I think some people get kind of nervous about that or they're worried about that. I actually think it's great. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I feel like for not knowing what I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah, what you're trying to do, and that's what I was explaining in that workout that I said cresting over the top of the hill. What
That
I
workout was tough, by the way.
do, well, but that's what you're trying to do is get some exposure and finding out where your opportunities are. Like you don't have unlimited free time. You're not a specialist. It's not like you're going to be doing 10 running workouts in the week. And so those workouts have to be just spot on. And where are those? And one of the things that being fast twitch dominant like you are, what you also want to do though is force the brain to recruit and sequence your muscle fibers faster, your fast twitch fibers faster. And when you would do heavy lifts at one rep, I mean, you're recruiting all of your fibers, but your bar speed is slow. What we want to do is we want to create a range of gears in terms of your cadence. And so the whole purpose of that cresting and rolling over the top was under fatigue, when those fast twitch fibers are recruited, to increase your cadence as you roll over the top.
Yeah,
And
that was a real bitch.
because those are new things for you. That's why there's, a lot of people, when I work with them, they want to do a fast 400. Let me just run the 400. It's just one lap around the track. You're not even ready to run a 50-meter sprint. Like, we've got to build you so that we can get the accelerations going. We can, and then gradually build there. I would never have someone do a 400 for time unless they've done a 200 for time. And I wouldn't have a 200 for time unless they did a 150 for time. You've got to build that section. That's why when I saw your hundreds, I'm like, that's great.
Yeah, I'm
That's
just
great.
trying to run them like when I would teach people powerlifting, there's different levels like teaching and coaching, but like you coach someone on how to do the lift properly.
Yeah.
And then from there, you start to kind of coach them some of the intricate stuff of like, hey, let's make this look cool. Let's make this look smooth. Let's make this look easy. Let's like when we're warming up, for example, like I used to observe a lot of the guys would make all these crazy faces and it would just be, we just have the bar on there. We just have, a 45-pound plate on each side and they're making all these squinty faces. And I was like, let's just relax the face. We don't need, maybe we do need that face when it's 900 pounds. Like that's understandable, but let's try to make it look pretty, and the same thing with running or a sport like gymnastics where they're actually getting graded on their movement, but they can't have a frowny face. They can't be straining and shaking. They have to actually make it look pretty. So I think that's a big part of sport. And so when I'm doing the hundreds, I'm not really thinking of like, not really thinking that. I'm thinking like, what if somebody saw me for the first time? How cool would it be for them to not necessarily say, oh my God, that guy's fast. That would be cool, but that's coming at some other time. But wow, that guy's moving really smooth. That looks great. They just think you're a runner.
That's what I noticed, Mark. I mean, what I noticed right away and looking at your videos when you were sprinting is how relaxed you were. I would call them a controlled sprint where you're retaining control of your form. You're not flailing. The foot strike is contained. There's very little vertical oscillation, meaning your speed is going forward versus up and down. And that's hard to do, by the way, when you're sprinting, because in order to sprint, I mean, think about like if you wanted maximum distance in shooting a cannonball, you're not going to shoot that cannonball in a linear direction. You're going to angle it up. And so in order to sprint, you have to fly. And that requires a certain amount of bounce. But yours was very controlled. I noticed that right away. Jaw was relaxed. There was no tension in there. And so I knew right away that you had at least one more gear, which is how you should be doing it. Form is key.
Yeah, and doing those, doing the 400s I did the other day, I just kind of like, it's interesting because it just seems like to be no like masterful way of running the 400. You're like, oh, I'm just going to try to like run a little slower in the beginning and then I'll turn it on at the end. But for me, I don't know what the best strategy for me is going to be moving forward, but if I try to do that and save it for the end, there's like nothing there. You're going as hard as you can, but you're at a 10, but you're moving at like a 7.
Yeah, so this is where you have to be really careful, because faster speeds, you have less capacity. And what is really challenging when you are doing workouts, especially at the stage where you are, and if I was there and coaching you, one of the hardest things is to give you enough recovery so that your metabolic pathway, your cardiorespiratory system recovers and your muscle fibers recover. The problem is if I give you too much recovery in some workouts, the heart rate drops too far from the sweet spot. And so it's hard to balance that. What I want you to always think about is when you're doing a workout, the purpose is to accumulate time at a particular speed. You're trying to get the stamina built up at that velocity. So if you were doing, let's just say you were doing 6 by 400 meters on 90 seconds, and your fourth one, it slipped to 95. The problem will be is that if you are working at a similar intensity from 1 to 6, but your muscles, unfortunately, are being trained to go slower. So you were doing them at 90, but now your suffering's still the same, but the muscles are learning to go slow. That's not what we want. What we're trying to do is we're trying to develop more and more capacity at a specific speed. So as athletes, this is where a smarter athlete knows what to do in that situation. Should I take more rest to give my muscles more time to recover so I can maintain the same velocity? Or am I just having a bad day and I should just pull the plug?
Yeah, when I got
and that's
done,
what you have to think about.
When I was doing some of the runs over the last couple of weeks and kind of testing the 400s and timing them, I haven't even really timed much of anything. When you came, I was like, I'm not really sure of my times.
Yeah.
I kind of have these,
Amazing.
times where I've checked the time myself, and
That's amazing.
I only have I only had estimates at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I did notice was towards the end of the workout, when I was lifting heavy, I started to get in recognition of like, okay, you only have like 1, maybe 2 of those. You're lucky that you even have 1. So that what I'm talking about is like one lift where it's like, like that was pretty borderline. Like you have an opportunity to do that same weight again if you want, but it better be clean, and you definitely don't have an opportunity to go up in weight at all. So those were kind of the parameters I made for lifting, and just in running and having these experiences where I'm breathing at a rate that I don't recall myself ever breathing. Maybe in a football practice a long time ago, maybe, but I don't recall having this breath that was like, that was kind of a, like, almost like you're scared, like I had like 1 or 2 of those, and I was like, that probably means we're near the end, or maybe it should be discontinued for the day.
That's really an interesting observation for me. I see that a lot in weightlifters and in gymnasts when they get into a cardiorespiratory type of a sport, such as running or CrossFit. Their diaphragm and intercostal muscles are not yet adequately trained, and they're not nearly as trained as the muscles are because of all the volume that you have done in your particular sport. And so the muscles are more ready to have adaptation. And that's something for you to be thinking about is doing some type of respiratory type of a training to develop your diaphragm and intercostal muscles, because what will happen is that your brain is allocating oxygen to where it's needed when you're working out, and where it's needed when you're running is it's sending it mostly to the legs, that oxygen rich blood to the legs to support the energy demand. It's also going to the arms. But we also have to remember the muscles that help you breathe, there's oxygen being delivered there, that blood. But when the diaphragm and intercostal muscles fail, then the brain has no option but to reroute that oxygen-rich blood to your lungs. And a lot of people, and Matt Fraser was known for that. If you go look at old videos of Matt Fraser, he would do this over-exaggerated because his lungs were failing. He wasn't able to get a breath. And so when he would tell me, my legs are tired, I don't have the capacity. But was it because of the muscles in the movement of running, or was it because the lungs failed and now there was no longer the amount of oxygen-rich blood to support the demand? And that's something for you to be thinking about is, and it's a hard thing to know, but the panic of the breath is a tell.
Yeah, panic is a good way of putting it.
So he would do this, Mark.
I have an O2 trainer thing. Have you seen those before? You breathe through them from Boss Rutan, that type of thing?
Yep. Perfect. Or like some kind of a power breath. Essentially what you're doing is you're pulling hard in. And so Fraser used that every night. It's one of the things that I didn't talk about much. I mean, I only worked with him, as a male athlete, but yeah, I mean, current like champion Jeff Adler, he does it 15 minutes every night.
Oh, wow.
Every night. It's a simple thing where you're just going through a breathing protocol.
So the real focus is on in this particular case, you want me to focus on inhaling.
Because so I was once in a pool with Fraser, and he was every hard interval he'd get on the pool deck and sit, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's all the water pressure. The water pressure is pushing so hard on my chest I can't breathe. And it's like, wow, that was very telling. This gasping, this shortness of breath, that's an indication that the lungs are starting to fail.
He's built like a block, that guy. It's all muscle.
Well, it solved it though. Later in his career, you'll see the last 3 years, he never did that over exaggeration of breath. Yeah, so it's something for you to think about.
What do you think, for me, strategy wise, trying to get better at these 400s and 200s? I'm sure there's kind of many ways to tackle it, but it seems like you could go shorter distances and you can go longer distances. I don't know. What are some of your thoughts?
I think that what you need to do, to me, I'm very clear watching you. You need to scale back and do shorter, almost like accelerations, like 30 meters, like three rounds of 3 by 30 meters, where you're taking 5 minutes between the rounds and you're taking, maybe 1 minute between the 30-meter accelerations.
Hold on a second. Are you kind of saying that because you think we need to kind of play to my strength a little bit more at the moment?
I do. I think that you want to build your boundaries first, and then you hone in specifically. So what you've done is you've done an amazing job at your zone 2, building up your structure, your ability to recover, your ability to endure, your stamina. It's truly in a perfect, ideal position. Now you want to maintain that. You don't want to just let it go. That's why what you're doing is spot on. But you then want to go to the opposite extreme. And what you want to do is you want to generate your power output, your ability to recruit those fast twitch fibers, to sequence those fibers. And then phase 2 would be to, after you have them recruited, force them to endure. We call it strength endurance. And strength endurance would be like doing 8 by 10 second hill sprints up a steep hill, like 15% grade with a 3-minute walk in between. Full recovery. And what you're doing is and running uphill is very different than flat ground. But what you're doing is you're forcing those fast fibers to be recruited. And now what you're doing is you're forcing them to endure by maintaining that power output going up the hill. that should be more of a priority right now for you than doing flat ground sprinting. If I was looking at where I would love to see you is doing these shorter acceleration drills on flat ground and doing the strength endurance piece, like doing these hill sprints. I like what you did the other day of cresting over the top. I mean, that's also building your VO2. So I mentioned peak power, short time domains. I'm talking about 12 seconds and under, right? Using that creatine phosphate system. But then you also have to build up your ceiling, your peak, in terms of your aerobic capacity, your ability to move and use oxygen. And that's what you did in those workouts because of the controlled intensity that you had. And so that's why I like what you've done.
So the cresting over the top workout. When I was doing them, I was running over this overpass here in Davis, and I think each one took like almost 3 minutes. Is that like a good duration? Like, so I'm getting pretty tired as I get to the hill. Once I get to the hill, I'm feeling it. I do have another gear to go into, but it's like an 8 out of 10. It's getting to be pretty difficult. And when I did multiple sets, I did 5 sets of that. They were all manageable. I could have done more sets. They were not easy though. It was a very intense workout, but I walked out of there too without any injury. I walked out of there without any, stitches in my side or anything like that.
That's why the running on, so it's a more of a shallow grade, and that's why it really worked well. Like you're doing a hill interval versus a hill sprint. A hill sprint
right.
is short and steep. An interval is more like a 5 to 6, 7% grade. It's more shallow, but it's longer. What I really like though is that just what you said, that RPE of 8. I call a VO2 max intensity an RPE of 8 to quantify it. And I sent you a note on this. Just think of the speed, like your 6-minute maximum effort speed. And you're like, yeah, what? Like, and I like that you, like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is think about if you did a time trial running as fast as you could for 6 minutes. And you think about the meters per second that you were averaging for that entire amount. That would be the targeted speed that I'd like you to hit.
Got it.
So anything faster than that 6 minutes is going to improve your VO2 max, your ability to move and use oxygen. Remember, the whole purpose of this is training your heart and your lungs, these central adaptations to get your heart to move more oxygen-rich blood, the stroke volume. So although you could do any movement, because you want to focus on running, it would be better to do it in the movement of running because, yeah, you're creating central adaptations by doing this intensity, right? The heart and the lungs, but you're also getting what we call a peripheral adaptation. The muscles, your running muscles, are seeing adaptations. It's just a better value of time.
And you were saying 3 sets, 30 meters, or 3 times 30 meters. And about how long would I have rest in between that, and how many maybe overall sets of that would I do?
So you would do a total of 9. So it's 3 rounds of 3 by 30. Between the rounds, you would take a full recovery. You would probably take 3-4 minutes. Between the individual efforts, you would take, people will complain about this, but really you should take, 3 minutes on those too. But you're going to be out there for an hour, and your total volume, you'll do 270 meters. Like it's not practical. So I would do like 1 minute of walking in between, and then do a complete stop and really focus on my start, my drive, and the acceleration. That's what you're doing. You're really trying to develop that ability to recruit and sequence fast twitch fibers. And that's what you notice when you're sprinting right now. when I look at your videos, the issue that I see is I don't want to say you look clumsy, you look awkward. You look like a kid that has gone through a growth spurt and now they're sprinting.
Yep.
And that's your neurological system is trying to figure out what's going on. Your muscle fibers are incredibly adapted, but it's your neurological system that is now trying to catch up. And that's very unusual for athletes.
It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel safe, especially because like my knees are going back further than you used to. My feet are going back further than you used to.
You look
sloppy. I'm having to twist it differently. The way I described myself before is like, I'm kind of like that. I'm like the Husafelt stone. The Husafelt stone that they pick up like in Rogue and the strongman guys.
Yep.
That's what my body's kind of made out of, is that. So if you push one side, the whole thing has to go with it. And at the moment, I'm trying to turn my body into being maybe a little bit, move a little bit more fluid like water.
The problem is, Mark, is that your neurological system is underdeveloped relative to your muscles.
Right.
Your muscles can actually, and that's where you're really at high risk of doing something that is bad. Because athletes aren't developed your way, right? They typically will develop this neurological pattern and to be able to recruit fibers and sequence them and get the flow down, and then the muscles come. You are heavily adapted and biased in one way, and that's why I would want to scale it back to train your neurological system, which that adaptation should happen fast. So that's why running uphill is good, because you're not going to reach too far because your foot's going to hit the hill. It's safer for you. And that's what's important because of your ability to generate an extreme amount of power.
I think that answers like most of the questions, because like I love to walk, that I love to walk, and I can even pop out these like 30-meter sprints. I can just kind of view it like, I'm just going on like another walk and just crank on some of these and hone in and focus on some of the things you mentioned there. I love doing hill.
That's a great idea, Mark. Like you should do that. Like if imagine you and I were doing, let's say we're going to do a 2-minute walk. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a 8-second acceleration. Your ability to go from a walking speed and recruit fibers and accelerate is going to be relatively easy for you, right? Because your fast twitch fibers are so dominant. You have a higher percentage of fast twitch fibers. I mean, then significantly more so than me.
Did you ever see the rhinoceros study that Andy Galpin did?
No.
I'll see if I can find the email of it, but I have it here in my studio. We blew it up. But Andy Galpin is a professor. He studies muscle and all this kind of stuff. He compared my muscle fibers to a rhinoceros, and my fast twitch muscle fibers were like 20% greater than that of a rhino.
I saw that chart when I was snooping around your building. You have it up on the wall, and there's the study on you. Yeah, no, you're an anomaly. I mean, that's why it's so exciting to see, because you clearly are fast twitch dominant on an extreme level. But your focus in an acceleration, that's going to be easy for you. If you were going to do a walk into like a surge like that, even 8, 10, maybe 12-second surge, what I would tell you is you have to learn how to turn your fast twitch fibers off. Because that will be the end of you. And that's where you're going to have to learn how to back off slightly so that you know that they're disengaging. For me, I'm opposite. It's very easy for me to disengage because I'm so, slow twitch dominant. It is the acceleration for me that I would be focused on in that type of a workout. That's why every workout, when you ask me, what do you think? It's like, I want you to have a purpose. Otherwise, why are you doing it? And I'll tell you a story. So I had a track coach in college, and We did 10 by 1 mile with an 800 jog in between. The next day, we did 10 by 1 mile with an 800 jog. And no one bothered to tell the coach, like, dude, we did that yesterday. They were able to cover up mistakes by volume. You don't have that because you have so many other things that you want to do. You're not a specialist.
Yeah, I'm seeing what these track athletes are doing on the track because it's track season over here at UC Davis, and I was just like, I think they were doing some testing the other day, but I was just like, I was in awe of them. It was really cool to watch. They were working hard.
They're so talented. That is an incredible running university. I mean, and it's so rich in history. I mean, back when I graduated in 1989 and down at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, and the Aggies, they were a powerhouse back then. I mean, and it's a dynasty, generational dynasty. No, I couldn't believe when you pulled up there, and I'm like, oh my God, we're in like, yeah.
It's cool that they let you just work out there. I mean, every once in a while they'll say, hey, you know, the track, you know, the athletes are using it from 1 to 3, but the rest of the time they let the public use it, which is great.
What's awesome is your videos that, you know, because the kids are around, they're all like eyeballing you. I think it's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, look at that, just freight train.
Yeah, there were some kids the other day. They're like, hey, do you want to hop in on this workout? And I said, not yet. Soon, though.
Because these kids are running sub 30-minute 10Ks. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know. It's insanity.
Yeah. So I would really love the idea of doing shorter explosive acceleration drills along with hill sprints. And then what you would do is transition into 40-meter efforts, then 60, and then we would maybe build and do a flying start 150. So not from dead start, you would get a flying start, and that 150 time, what we could then do is calculate what your 200 time would be and write some 200-meter specific workouts so that you could be successful when you attack that. This is where if you attack a 200, you want to have a target time. You don't want to just freestyle it, and you will get that from your 150. And that's a very common way to do a flying start and then estimate what your 200 is, and then do a few 200-based workouts based upon that specific intensity. From 200, now we can go and open up the door to so many other options and build up to 400. But yeah, the first thing would be is to get that 150, and that's what you should be setting your eyes on. But it would be also a flying start where you would hit the starting line at speed. It's less risky, it's less stressful, and you're still going to get a result that's in a formula to calculate the 200 that's well established.
So an area for me to kind of like work on, but also an area where I need to be careful, could potentially get hurt in, is this accumulation of time at certain speeds. That kind of seems what you're saying. Like it's an area to work on, and we're going to have to work on it with probably shorter intervals, and we're going to have to use some tricks. We're going to have to use some hills because, for lack of a better term, I could just like blow myself out.
That's right. Your muscles have way more capacity than your coordination. And that's what concerns me a little bit is that when you slightly fail, you start to fatigue, you're going to start reaching in your stride. Your foot strike in your first few are beautiful. Like your foot's nice and relaxed, and your baby toe. So I did a bunch of juicing with turmeric. That's why my hands are yellow. But yeah, it's beautifully relaxed. But then you notice as you get deeper in and then further down, you start to reach a little bit more. Your knee acts as a pendulum, and instead of driving your foot down, you start getting lazy, meaning the brain, it's just tired. You don't have enough time in. And so that's what I would be concerned about. And that's where most people, when they get hurt, it's on flat ground short sprints, and it usually happens in the last rep because they overextend and that heel hits. The whole posterior chain is in tension, and it just pops right, the high hamstring.
Yeah, one of my main goals with this whole thing too is to, I would like to be able to have an overcapacity for what it is I'm trying to do.
Yep.
At all times. Cause this is not the same as my powerlifting career. This is a lot of fun. Obviously I want to get competitive with it. I do want to race against other people. Like all that is coming, but I don't know when. But I'm not super concerned about that part of it. So hurting myself is more likely to happen. I would say probably more accidentally than, like, you're making me aware of a lot of these things, and I'm already aware of like how my body feels when I'm doing these things. So I should be good to go, other than just like, oh, well, you slightly tweaked something because you're trying to run fast. So I think I should be pretty good.
I agree with you. I mean, when we went to the track, when I was out there last, when we were doing those 150s, you were so dialed in how your hamstrings were feeling and your ability to gauge that fatigue and the risk associated with doing more. That shows your level of competency. That I find it interesting that you don't have nearly, like a lifetime of experience in running, but you do have it in muscle adaptation, muscle use, and the feeling. And the feelings, it's identical. And that's why I really respect it. It's like, I think I'm done.
I could feel it. I learned that a lot from powerlifting. Like powerlifting is very strange because it's like different than just your muscular system. Your central nervous system is involved.
Yeah.
You get done with it. You hit a certain lift a certain way. I remember like racking weights. Like I'd put the weight back into the rack, and I remember I would say to a training partner, like, I got stronger today. Like like it just happened just now. I just felt it. I got better right on that set right there in that moment. I got better. I don't need to do tricep extensions. I don't need to do curls. I can just go home. Like I'm good. And they would always be like, that's so weird. What are you talking about? I'm like, you don't feel that? I could feel it. I could feel it in my bones almost.
That to me is so, we've kind of hinted around this conversation before. To me, I think back on my competitive career and those moments where something magical just happened in training, and it wasn't like it was planned. Like Highway 9 in Saratoga that climbs up the Saratoga Mountains. It's 7-mile climb, and I would just be out on a ride, and I'm just riding along, and I'm somehow, some way, just in the groove, and not trying, unusually hard, but I'm flying. And that feeling that you said of like, I got better today. Like I feel like everything is in unison with one another. And it's interesting you say that, because those were very rare days that everything that came together. It was my cardio, my neurological system, my muscles, and it was all in this. I think flow is overused, but it was just, that's what it felt like. And it wasn't extreme effort. And that's where I think that if somehow in some way that could happen more frequently, and maybe that's why champions dominate, is because they find that and they can get back to it.
I think it happens more frequently when you don't care about it as much. And we've talked before about the grip we had on the show.
Yeah.
And Mark, when he was on the show, he was kind of saying how he would like sort of disappear from the group. He'd disappear from everybody, and everyone's like, where the hell did he go? Yeah. And then he would just come back and he would like crush everybody, and everyone was like, couldn't figure it out. But I think maybe just because he felt like he already kind of had it, things just came to him a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a very, incredible talent on. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? That that was in the 80s, and his legacy is still as dominant as ever. I mean, and the times that he's posted, it's remarkable what he was able to do. And you're probably right. Like he was able to somehow bring all of those pieces together where it didn't feel like effort to him, because he was never burnt out.
We're talking a little bit about Mark Allen here. What do you think a little bit about Mark Sisson has kind of told me before that when he was, running back in the day, that like running wasn't as recreational. Like there were people in the race and they were like runners.
Yeah.
And he was just saying like how fast a lot of people were. He was like, man, he's like, a lot of people were, finishing, well below like a 2.5 hour, marathon. He's like, there wasn't really as much recreational fundraising, Boston Marathon type of stuff going on. What are some of your thoughts around that?
It's funny that I wasn't very good at running when I did triathlons. I mean, my 10K was around 31 minutes, and I entered a 10K on the track at Stanford Stadium, and I got lapped 3 times. And
how long ago was that?
It was probably in 88, 89.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and so I that's interesting because I looked at it now and I see all of these fundraisers that you can get a place going into Boston and have these iconic experiences. And I love that options available because there are a lot of athletes that are recreational. They're good. They're not great, but it's because they have so many other obligations in their lives. And it's a shame that when their window of athletic ability is present, they're not able to do it because of other commitments. And I love the fact that now you can go in and enter, compete, and do Berlin and finish in 5 hours.
Yeah, I just think Mark Sisson is funny because he's like, if you don't finish in under 3 hours, then you're just jogging.
So I have one saying that is identical to that. And my saying is, don't bother doing a swim workout if it's less than a mile. Don't even bother.
Yeah, for like the volume, huh?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't do enough volume, there's no adaptation, but it's also all of the difficulty. You got to go to the pool, you're getting wet and dry. It's like, I'm not getting in. Yeah.
Do you still swim quite a bit?
It's the one area that I still am okay on. Yeah. But only against recreational swimmers like CrossFitters.
Yeah, you're going to have to come over to the Davis Masters and swim with my wife sometime.
So, in my opinion, the best triathlete ever to exist before he moved out of there was Dave Scott. And, he's won Kona, I think, 6 times.
Yeah, he was crazy.
And he was out of Davis, and he was the Masters coach there at the pool. Yeah, that's an iconic spot for me because he's a legend.
My wife swam at the University of Davis or University of Kansas, and she did 400 IM to show you what a glutton for punishment she was.
Brutal.
It's like the worst workout. Well, yeah, thank you. I wrote down. Go ahead.
That's also one thing that if you ever did go to the pool, it would be high value for you is to get some fins. And because we talked about this last time I was there. And I mean, there's so many things that you can do, but this is something that's high value. If you went to the pool, my recommendation is I would get a set of fins. The short little jammer fins that are maybe like 1 to 2 inches longer, extend beyond your toes. The reason why those are short is so that you maintain the same kick speed, right? And that's why. The next ones are, maybe extend out 10 inches and they're swimming fins. And that's where you're going to build strength. And that's what I would recommend for you. It's a slower cadence, but what you're doing is you're developing your high hamstring and your hip flexors by doing that kick with the fins, because the kick is not bending the knees, it's from the hips. The other thing is, and this is the area that when I look at you run, you're not getting good hip extension because of your ankle mobility. You don't get good dorsiflexion. So when you're trying to extend back, you're not able to actually push far, far back unless you flare your foot out to the side because your angle between your shin and the top of your foot is too great. You've got to shrink that down and get more mobility. Well, by swimming with the fin, you're going to actually create more flexibility in that area. And so it's something to think about. But the one of the big areas that is noticeable when you do run is the hip extension that you're getting. It's limited, and it's not limited because of tightness in your hips. You're not bending like you're seated in a chair, right? You don't notice that at all. You've got it opens, the hip does. it's unfortunately, it's almost like you're wearing combat boots, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. No,
Yeah.
I know that. I
So
know, like, yeah, if I push forward onto my toes, my heel wants to come off the ground, almost immediately. My ankles stiff, calves are stiff, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
yeah, that's why speed walkers, I've had a chance to work with two speed walkers, and 2/3 of their stride occurs beyond their center of mass. So they're really keeping that heel on the ground and driving back to open up the hips as much as possible. And they're getting a good 10 centimeters more of extension off of the back. And so
I
that's,
wonder if I could practice that on the treadmill a little bit.
yeah. So the way you practice it is that you focus on keeping the heel down on the ground as long as you can, and really forcing that foot back by driving and keeping contact of the heel down. And then when you toe off, you're going to drive off of the big toe. So it's heel down, big toe, heel down, big toe. And what you will get is, by doing that, you'll see right away 10 centimeters more in extension. And the way you're
Are you
going to
talking
tell
about
is
in a walk?
just line up a video and look at where the foot makes contact and where the foot comes off the ground.
And are you talking about in the case of like a walk?
Yeah, so I would start with walking, and like even when we were talking about rucking. So
Yes.
in rucking, you're going to want to focus more on the extension than the foot strike, because a lot of times in military, the people I work with, they're carrying 1-to-1, 1 kilo of body weight is 1 kilo of ruck weight. So you don't have a big extension. The foot is landing underneath. So how do you get speed? It's what's happening behind your center of mass. So walking is perfect. And if you send me a video, I would tell you on 0% incline on a treadmill, I would really love to see at foot strike, that's of your total stride between toe off and foot strike, I'd like 1/3 in the front of your body and 2/3 behind you. It would be a good drill for you, and that would be a sneaky way of doing your zone 2, wearing enough weight on the ruck to get there. And guaranteed you're not going to have to wear a lot of weight, because this cadence is going to be hard. For you, I would say somewhere around 140 steps per minute would be really the extreme end for you in terms of speed walking.
All right. Well, you gave me a lot of homework. I really appreciate it.
I'll send you a note.
Yeah, obviously I'll be hitting you up to try to make some more sense of this.
Yeah, happy to help. I'm so excited for you.
Is there anything I should avoid, like from a lifting perspective? Like, I'm lifting, but I'm not powerlifting. I'm not necessarily bodybuilding. I think bodybuilding like consumes a little bit too much energy. So I'm not really loving that right now for kind of like what it does for running, but I am doing some jumps. I'm doing some med ball tosses. I'm doing some step ups and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that doing ballistics for you would be of value. That would be high value. The other thing is because of your age. And we've talked about this, but the two things that are going to happen to you is you're going to start losing lean muscle mass. I mean, fast twitch dominant athletes atrophy faster than slow twitch because you lose that fast. But it's your range of motion that I'm most concerned about, right? You're incredibly flexible. I like, considering your size, it's really amazing. But from the ages of 40 to 70, your stride length gets cut by 50% because of those two things. You lose the ability to generate power, right? Speed. You lose that fast twitch. And so you have to, masters athletes, they have to lift heavy. And the other thing is that they lose range of motion. And so the mobility piece. So for you, because you already, have your foundation of strength, it's really the ballistic side, doing, weighted box jumps, doing smaller depth drops, jumping split lunges, movement patterns that are similar to running, but they're more ballistic. So you bypass the normal recruitment of slow twitch into fast, and it's just fast.
Awesome.
So
thank you, Chris.
Even doing like jumping split lunges or rebounding broad jumps into a run. Because think about
I
it.
can even do that. Again, I can even do some of that on a walk.
Absolutely. I mean, think about that. Like, let's just say hypothetically you do uh, you do 20 meters of rebounding broad jumps. What will happen is that because it's ballistic, it's going to force a higher percentage of fast twitch fibers to be recruited immediately. They're rebounding, and so the sequencing, the neurological system, and the percentage recruitment of fibers is going to be high. Now that you have all of those recruited, you're going to do a short sprint and force those additional recruited fibers to endure, similar to what you would do on an uphill run. Does that make sense?
It does. Yep.
Yeah. So jumping
Thank you so
split
much.
lunges into a run.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be great. That'll be
Yeah.
challenging too, because those are kind of difficult for me because I haven't really done them in a while. So
Yeah.
the
Do
balance,
few,
the
like if you're
coordination,
doing like a jumping split lunge, and if you did it with weight, like some weight, like you had maybe a 45-pound plate overhead for you, and you would do it in your split jerk depth. You would do maybe 5 on each side at most,
Mhm.
and then go. Yeah.
Where can people find you, Chris?
Robotcapacity.com.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. And like I said, I'll be hitting you up for more with probably more questions. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Thanks.
Have a great rest of your day.
All right, bro.